The first thing anyone noticed about Evan was how still he Saturday. In the back right corner of classroom 16Z, where sunlight filtered faintly through biofiltration panels, and the gravity fluctuation was slightly off by 0.03 grams, he always chose the same seat. Not the one by the window, not the one closest to the charging ports or gel dispensing unit. No, Evan sat precisely 3 chairs from the end, back straight, feet flat, shoulders relaxed, always evenly spaced. Never slouching, never fidgeting. The Zentari instructor, Vel Tess, once remarked that it was unusual for a human. Their species exhibits near constant kinetic output, even while at rest, it had commented in a staff briefing. Yet, this one remains immobile. It is unsettling. No one spoke much to Evan, not really. He didn't talk unless spoken to. His standard was flawless, but he never raised his voice, never raised his hand. Most assumed he was dull, or scared, or perhaps just slow. And if he didn't want to be noticed, he was doing an excellent job until the whispers began. "Why does he breathe like that?" sneered Drac, a quadruped from the ice world Kelvon. "In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow and stupid, like he's sleeping with his eyes open." "Because humans are soft?" hissed Pelka, whose thin exoskeleton clicked faintly when she laughed. "My brother says they have bones that snap like dry root flesh, just crack, and they fold in half." They were wrong. Evan's posture wasn't fear, it was drilled in control. Back on Earth, before his family left for the diplomatic sector on Utren IV, his father had enrolled him in Muay Thai classes at age 6. It hadn't been about fighting, not for Evan, it was about balance. About learning how to move without thinking, how to not move when the moment demanded it. He had trained until shinbone met pad without flinching, until his stance became second nature, until his breath could slow a heart racing with adrenaline. No one here knew. He had never needed them to. But lately, things were shifting. The first time it happened, it was minor. A globule of synth ink landed on the back of his neck during lab review. Sticky, cold, meant to startle. Evan had tensed, but didn't react. His hand reached back slowly, wiped it off with a sterile cloth, and kept writing. The second time, someone mimicked his quiet breathing during a group exercise, loudly, over and over, right beside his ear. Drac grinned, loping circles around Evan's desk, occasionally bumping the leg of his chair. He didn't respond. He didn't even flinch. This, of course, emboldened them. Alien adolescents, no matter the star system, seemed to share the same pattern. Test the limits, then push past them. 3 days later, Evan arrived to find his chair missing. He retrieved another from storage and sat down without a word. Drac knocked that one slightly askew with a swing of his tail, then smirked when Evan silently adjusted it back into place. "You're like a rock that breathes," Drac said that time, his voice thick with contempt. "Do all humans fold up and sit when it gets hard? You're a disappointment even for prey." Pelka had laughed. Even a few others chuckled. It continued. Someone threw a crumpled nutrient wrapper at his head during mealtime review. Evan's fingers caught it midair. He didn't look up. He dropped it into the disposal bin, then calmly resumed his equations. That silence was misread. Not as discipline, not as self-control, but as permission. So when Drac finally stepped behind him during the first session of advanced diplomatic behavior and pressed down on Evan's head palm firm, pushing toward the desk, laughing softly as he leaned his bulk forward, no one stopped him. Evan's eyes were open, not angry, not even afraid. Just somewhere else. A long way away, like he was staring at something no one else could see. "What happens when we press, Drac muttered. "Does he squeak? Does he run?" Evan's shoulders didn't rise, his hands didn't ball into fists, but his pulse, it thundered, just beneath the skin. Underneath all the stillness, his heart raced like a memory reawakened. There had always been a line. His coaches warned him, control is power, control is everything. But when Drac leaned closer, hand, still pressing, and whispered into his ear, "Humans should kneel by default," something slipped. The clinch happened in a blur. Evan's left arm came up, weaving inside Drac's shoulder and looping around the thick, muscled neck. He didn't stand. He didn't shout. He didn't even rise from his seat. The twist came from the hips, a movement drilled thousands of times into muscle memory. A pivot. A snap. The sound, sickening, unmistakable, cracked through the classroom like a gunshot. Drax's body folded instantly. His knees gave out. He hit the floor with a thud that echoed through the silent room. One leg kicked reflexively. Then, stillness. Pelka screamed. One of the others bolted for the door. Evan was frozen in his seat, chest heaving, fingers shaking. "I didn't mean to," he said, barely above a whisper. He hadn't even stood. Instructor Veltes entered 20 seconds later, scanning the carnage, processing too quickly, already radioing for medics. The medics came fast, slithering, efficient, four-armed Sarvani twins. They stabilized Drac on a portable gurney with a suspension brace around the neck. The scan confirmed it. C2 fracture. High cervical damage. If he lived if he would never walk again. Neural repair and Kelvin physiology was notoriously poor past the spinal stem. Evan sat still while they worked. He didn't cry, didn't argue. He looked pale, not from fear of punishment, but from the horror of what his hands had done. The whispering began that same day. He didn't even get up. His hand moved, and the Kelvin just dropped. They say it's some kind of Deathworld art. Martial science. The faculty launched an investigation immediately. Protocols demanded it. Evan was escorted quietly, not in restraints, to the administrative wing. Not a single guard touched him. Because no one wanted to test if he'd react again. The administrative wing smelled of ion cleanser and old carpet. Evan sat across from a tricorps adjudicator who hadn't blinked in over 8 minutes. A low hum filled the space, part ventilation, part ambient noise meant to calm nervous systems. It didn't work on Evan. His hands were folded in his lap, but the tremor hadn't stopped. He didn't speak unless directly questioned. He didn't know how to explain that it hadn't been anger. It hadn't even been conscious. Just something that rose up when the pressure got too close. A second figure entered. Human this time. Tall, gray-suited, with a slim data slab, and too many pins on his lapel. "Evan Riley," the man began, voice clipped. "I'm Marcus Levin, EarthGov's cultural liaison on Utren 4. I've been assigned to observe and represent your interests during this review." Evan nodded once. "Your instructors have already submitted incident reports. There's security footage. There are eyewitnesses." Levin adjusted his sleeve. "What we need now is context." Evan looked down. "I didn't mean to," he said again, quieter. "I was just trying to breathe." The tricorps' voice buzzed to life, translated through a throat mic. "Student Evan, was the application of force premeditated?" "No." "Did you intend to cause permanent injury?" "I didn't want to hurt him at all." 1. There was a pause. "And yet, the injury occurred." Evan hesitated. He leaned too close. His hand was on me. I don't even remember deciding. It just happened." The adjudicator's eyes flickered with faint blue static. "Do you possess formal combat training?" Levin cut in before Evan could answer. "He's trained in Muay Thai, a traditional Earth martial art. Emphasis on structure, control, and defensive readiness." "It is not a recreational dance then?" "No," Evan said softly. "It's meant to end fights. Fast." A longer pause followed, this one heavier. Datapads flicked with silent updates. At least 2 other administrators were observing remotely. Their input blinked across the tricorps' wrist slate. "We will continue review. You are not under arrest, Student Evan, but you are to remain on restricted grounds until further notice." Evan nodded again. No resistance. Just that same weary stillness. By the next day, the story had fermented into something else. Whispers spilled through the corridors like gas. Every student had a version. They say he knew exactly where to hit. Like, down to the millimeter. No, it wasn't even a strike. It was some kind of internal organ thing. Humans touch a spot, and boom. "My cousin says Earth's gravity makes their bones like steel. They train by breaking themselves and healing stronger." Evan walked to the cafeteria under escort. Not guards. Just 2 quiet drones flanking his sides, blue lights glowing gently. He hated it. The attention. The stares. He hadn't eaten much. Everything tasted like paste now. The first real consequence arrived by midday, a message from the medical ward. Drac is stable, unconscious. Neural scaffolding has been implanted. Spinal function uncertain. Estimated recovery, extensive. A human doctor had helped. Neurologist flown in from EarthGov's embassy sector. They told Evan that Drac might live, might. But if he ever walked again, it would be through mechanical assistance and years of muscle retraining. The damage to the cervical vertebrae had compressed key nerve bundles. Kelvon biology lacked regenerative properties in their central trunks. Surgery could stabilize, but not restore. The guilt settled like a stone in his chest. Evan found himself returning to the training loops in his memory, the smell of sweat and vinyl mats. His coach's voice, patient but firm. The clinch is for control, not force. But if you twist with your hips, if you rotate just a bit more. He hadn't rotated a bit more. He'd rotated perfectly. And that's what terrified him. That evening, his room had a visitor. Pelka. Alone. She stood just outside the door, claws tapping against the frame, wings held close to her thorax in a gesture that meant uncertainty among her kind. "I shouldn't be here," she said. "But I needed to see you." Evan looked up from his desk. He hadn't turned on the light. The glow from his datapad backlit his face, casting shadows under his eyes. "I didn't want to hurt him," he said. Again. Pelka's voice was tight. "You snapped his spine in one move." "I know." She hesitated. "Is that what humans do? Wait, and then destroy?" "No," his throat caught. "That's not what I am. I just wanted it to stop." Pelka didn't come in. She didn't offer comfort. But she didn't sneer, either. "I thought you were weak," she admitted. "All that silence, all that looking down." "I am weak," Evan said, quietly. "If I were strong, I wouldn't have let it go that far." She blinked slowly. "That's not how strength works for my people. It is for mine." She left without another word. 3 days passed. Evan remained confined to academic grounds. He was allowed to attend sessions, but not group labs. He had to eat separately. He wasn't suspended, not officially, but no one was sure what to call his status. During that time, he saw fewer faces, heard fewer whispers, but the silence wasn't comfort. It was isolation. A week later, they called him back to the review chamber. Levon was already there. The Tricor adjudicator had been replaced by a Lorani arbiter, 4 eyes, slick carapace, an aura of tension like vibrating string. "Evan Riley," it said, "your review is complete." He braced. The response was excessive, but initiated under extreme provocation. "The Academy acknowledges that disciplinary frameworks did not adequately address interspecies aggression in shared environments. Your training qualifies as controlled, not combative by design." Relief flickered, then paused. "However, your actions resulted in life-altering injury. Therefore, you are to remain under behavioral probation for the remainder of the cycle. Off-world travel is restricted. No physical engagement of any kind, including training, may occur on Academy grounds." Evan swallowed. "And Drac?" The arbiter hesitated. "He remains paralyzed from the upper thoracic down. They do not expect full recovery. He will be transferred to a long-term rehabilitative facility on his homeworld." Evan nodded, slowly. Can I write to him?" "No contact has been requested." That night, Evan sat cross-legged on his dorm floor. No training pads, no gloves, just breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. He pressed one hand to his shin, faint scar tissue under the skin from an old bone conditioning drill, and tried to remember why he started training at all. Discipline, control, focus. Not violence. Never violence. The legend would outgrow the truth in weeks. The quiet human who shattered a Kelvon's spine without standing. A predator in disguise, a sitting weapon, a soft-voiced killer. But the real Evan? He sat quietly in class, always in the same seat, 3 from the end. Back straight, feet flat, hands still trembling, ever so slightly. Time moved strangely after the incident, not fast, not slow, just disconnected, like watching days fall into each other from behind glass. Evan's world shrank. No gym access, no sparring routines. The Academy's recreational modules, even the neutral ones, like kinetic puzzles or low-grav swimming, were temporarily off limits. He was allowed to attend lectures but had to enter separately, sit at a newly assigned workstation near the emergency exit, and leave before the others. Some of the instructors tried to be kind, offering quiet nods or politely pretending nothing had happened. Others kept their distance. He could feel the shift, eyes tracking him with a different weight, conversations halting when he passed. But it wasn't hate. Not anymore. It was fear. And that might have been worse. The whispers followed him like a second shadow. I heard he took down a Brintari in one hit during Earth training. They say he doesn't even need to move. He can just wait until you're too close, and then snap. One group claimed he was EarthGov's sleeper agent, here to assess alien weaknesses. Another insisted his family had been part of a death cult that raised children as living weapons. No one asked Evan. No one wanted the real version. Except one. Her name was Sira. A mild, two-hearted Kalari with thin iridescent scales and a voice like wind in leaves. She approached after a hydroponics lecture not too close, not threatening, but clearly intentional. She had always been one of the quieter ones, no giggling, no jeering, just observant. I read the report, she said, standing at a comfortable distance. They said your response was instinctual. Evan paused, unsure if it was a trap. It wasn't on purpose, he said. I didn't think, I just reacted. That's what scares them, she replied, that you didn't need to think. He looked down. It scares me too. She tilted her head slightly. So why learn something like that, if it does this? The question stuck. He thought of the old studio back on Earth. Wooden floors, peeling posters of long-retired champions, the sharp tang of liniment oil. His first trainer, Coach Danvers, explaining the purpose of the clinch. It's not just for hitting. It's to control. To breathe in chaos. I didn't learn it to hurt people, Evan said. I learned it so I'd know I could defend myself, and then choose not to. Sira seemed to consider that. And yet, you did. I waited too long, he said, trying not to be seen. I thought if I didn't respond, they'd stop. They didn't. No. She sat down beside him, careful not to brush against his arm. They won't again. The Academy's head medical officer, a burly Zarnik with 9 eyes and a PhD in interspecies trauma care, summoned Evan a week later. Dr. Beltran waited in the medbay's neutral observation room, hands folded. Evan sat across, back stiff. I wanted you to hear it from me, Beltran said. Drac is being transported home tomorrow. Evan nodded slowly. His spinal scaffolding stabilized. No brain trauma, but the neurological signals below the upper thoracic are not returning. He's alive, but he won't regain movement. Not naturally. Are they mad? Evan asked, voice dry. The Kelvan are proud, Beltran said, but they understand cause and effect. Drac's parents were made aware of the incident's context. They haven't requested legal action. But I won't lie to you, they consider their son's injury a matter of deep cultural shame. They see him as broken. Evan felt sick. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't personal. I know, the doctor said gently. But our intentions don't always shape outcomes. Actions do. He pulled up a hollow projection Drac's spine, overlaid with repair braces and nerve mapping. A glowing cluster marked the damage. It looked small. C2 through C4, Beltran explained. One twist, at the wrong angle. Human necks can suffer the same. In fact, yours would have been worse without the shoulder musculature you've built. I didn't mean to twist that far. You trained your whole life to make your body respond instantly under pressure. That's what happened. The image lingered between them. Then Beltran sighed and turned it off. You're not a monster, Evan. But monsters don't always know they're monsters until someone else tells them. That night, Evan didn't sleep. He tried to apologize, drafted messages, deleted them, recorded hollows, deleted those too. What could he say? I'm sorry I snapped your spine by accident? Instead, he started writing letters he never sent. Not just to Drac, but to his old coach, to his father, to himself, trying to explain what it felt like to be both the weapon and the wound. He wrote, "I wasn't angry. That's what scares me the most. I wasn't even thinking about hurting him. I just wanted the pressure off my head. I wanted air. But I turned it the way I was taught, and now someone can't walk again. And they think I'm dangerous because I am, not always, but enough, and I don't know what to do with that. And finally, I used to love the stillness, that moment between breath and movement. Now I hate it, because it's the space where something awful waits to happen." By the start of the new month, Evan was permitted back into the general dining hall with conditions. He entered at the end of the queue, took his tray, Saturday at an isolated table. To his surprise, someone joined him. Not Sira. Not Pelka. A hulking Brintari male with deep-set eyes and translator modules, implanted directly along his jawline. "You're the one who broke the Kelvon," the alien said, matter of fact. Evan didn't answer. "I don't like bullying," the Brintari continued. "But I understand why they picked you. Small. Quiet. Seemed easy." He paused. "You're not easy." Evan looked up, cautious. "What's your name?" he asked. "Cass." Cass studied him for a moment. "I used to think humans were fragile. Still kind of do. But now I think you're just compact. Like handheld weapons." Evan didn't smile. Cass leaned in. "I'm not here to threaten you. I'm here to ask if you want to train." "Train? You've got control issues. I've got strength issues. Maybe we cancel each other out." Evan blinked. "We're not allowed to spar." Cass shrugged. "Not officially, but there's always joint biokinetics class." Evan hesitated, then nodded. He didn't vanish again. Not quite. The academy kept him on probation. Strict supervision. Weekly counseling. But he returned to class, returned to learning. Sira began sitting with him more often. Cass became a quiet shadow beside him, never saying much, but never far. He didn't fight, not again. But he did move. Slowly. Carefully. Among the whispers. The term ended with the usual array of protocol audits, ethics seminars, and formal conflict resolution briefings, all expanded, restructured, and emphasized since the incident. Evan attended every one, front row, focused, quiet. The instructors never said his name aloud during lectures, but it hung in the air between examples. Interspecies boundaries must be respected. Misinterpretation of posture or silence is not justification for provocation. Instinctual defense mechanisms vary by species and may result in unintended escalations. He never flinched during those moments. He just listened. They didn't ask him to speak, but he did once voluntarily during a restorative diplomacy workshop. Not during the group scenario, not during the role play. But afterward, when everyone else was packing up, he stood by the exit and said to the instructor, softly, "Sometimes silence isn't peace, it's a warning." The instructor blinked, nodded once, and added that to the board the next day. Anonymous quote, "Stillness can be a warning." That version of Evan, the one who spoke softly after class, who didn't avoid eye contact anymore, who didn't pretend the incident hadn't happened, was not the one the academy had feared. But it was the one they had to learn how to receive. By midterm, he was allowed partial access to low-impact kinetic courses, not striking, not clinching. Just body mechanics and neutral space balance drills. Cass partnered with him every time. "Still terrified you're going to break me in half," the Brintari joked once, as they both calibrated their mass shift movement on the low-grav rings. "I'm terrified I might," Evan said, no smile. "You won't. Not good enough. Then don't stop training." Cass meant it. Not just for combat, not even for balance, but for control. Evan knew now that control wasn't something you had. It was something you maintained. Over and over. Breath by breath. One morning, Dr. Beltran called him back to the medical bay, not for a checkup, not for a debrief. Just a message. "Drac has submitted a statement," the doctor said, sliding a secure datapad across the desk. Evan stared at it. His hands didn't move. "He dictated it 2 days ago. Asked that you read it in privacy. It's not long." The pad stayed on the desk. It was 10 minutes before Evan touched it, another 5 before he tapped it open. To Evan Riley? I remember almost nothing from that day, only that I pushed, and that you didn't fight back. Until you did. I've seen the footage. I don't blame you anymore. What I did wasn't harmless. Not culturally, not personally. I thought you were weak. And I treated you like weakness meant permission. I have to learn how to live in a chair now. I'm not good at that. But I'm still alive. That's more than some get. You did what your body was trained to do. And I did what mine was taught to deserve. I won't forgive myself easily. You don't need to forgive me either. Just don't stop breathing. The quiet ones carry things the loud ones never notice. Drac. Drac. Evan sat with the message for a long time. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just read it again. Then once more. His probation was reviewed at term's end. Not lifted, but amended. He was permitted full classroom access, unsupervised. Training was still limited, no contact drills, no competitive sparring. But rehabilitation sessions were approved with observation. He walked into the training dome one afternoon, uncertain, palms sweating. Sira met him there. Not to fight, just to watch. You look like you're preparing for war, she said, gently. I'm preparing not to, Evan replied. The floor beneath them shimmered with heat-reactive tiles. He stood in the center, took a breath, then moved. Slow, deliberate, no strikes, no patterns. Just shifting his weight, finding his axis. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't dramatic. But instructors from 2 departments watched from the observation deck and said later that he moved like a language they hadn't yet learned. The final weeks passed in relative peace. Evan kept to his seat, now 4th from the end instead of 3rd, a small shift he made after realizing others had adjusted their routines around him. It was his own gesture, not apology, not concession, just awareness. And something else happened. The bullying didn't return. Not just because of fear, though some of that remained, but because the academy had changed. The whispers were different now. Humans don't bark, they bite. He was trained to not respond, and he still broke someone by accident. They don't pick fights, they finish them. Evan hated those versions. Because he knew the truth. He wasn't a killer, but he was capable. He was still learning how to live with that. One day, in civics lecture, Instructor Veltes asked a question during interspecies behavioral analysis. Evan raised his hand. Not high, just enough. He answered calmly, clearly. A small moment. But the room stilled. After class, Veltes approached and said, "It is difficult to teach the concept of deterrence without demonstrating it. You demonstrated it." Evan looked him in the eye. "That's not what I wanted to teach." The instructor tilted his head. "Then what did you?" Evan paused. "That silence isn't surrender, and peace isn't always quiet." On the last day of term, Sira found him sitting in the biodome garden, where humidity clung to the air and hybrid earth fern species were just beginning to unfurl. "You're staying another cycle?" she asked. "Yeah," Evan said. "Same course track. Same dorm, probably." She sat beside him. "You're not afraid of being noticed anymore." He smiled, just a little. "No point pretending I'm invisible." Sira turned slightly. "I still hear them talk about you. Some say you're a danger, others say you're a ghost in combat boots." "What do you say?" "I say," she replied, "you're someone who sat through being humiliated, shoved, mocked, and still didn't want to hurt anyone." Evan nodded slowly. "But I did." "Yes," she said. "And you owned it. That's more human than anything I've ever seen." They sat in silence for a while. Not the kind that waits to explode, not the kind that hides violence. Just silence, honest and whole. Later that night, Evan went to the training dome, alone. He placed 2 mats out not for sparring, just drills. He stretched, moved, flowed. At one point, he paused, held a stance, balanced on the balls of his feet. He touched the scarred part of his shin, ached, then breathed. In through the nose. out through the mouth. He stayed like that for a long time. Still. Not afraid. Because now, he knew what stillness could hide. And what it could mean. And that made all the difference.